Hello my sweeties and welcome back to my channel. If you don't already know me, my name is Elise and thank you for joining my spooky little family. In today's video, we are starting a very exciting journey, cutie patooties. We are gonna be on one.
I just had two Cokes, two cookies and a Coke. This is phenomenal.
Since the passing of our lovely David Lynch hit me and many performers and film lovers, filmmakers so hard, it now felt more necessary than ever to take a look back at all of his work and celebrate his legacy together. Now, at the very beginning of my channel, I did do a review of Eraserhead because it is one of my favorite films ever. And I, at that time, was like, yeah, I'm gonna cover more of his movies. And then I just never got around to it. And now is the time. So when David Lynch passed, there was a really sweet tweet that he wrote that was kind of resurfacing online. And to quote him, it says, "This weekend, I'm going to try to find out if I'm connected to the moon," with a follow-up tweet that he wrote 3 days later saying, "I'm pretty sure I'm connected to the moon," which really struck a chord with me and a lot of David Lynch lovers. And it felt so beautiful to have that tweet all over my feed the day that I found out this news. And with that, I welcome you all my series, Connected to the Moon, a David Lynch retrospective. And in this episode, we will be talking about Blue Velvet. Written and directed by David Lynch, starring Kyle MacLachlan, Laura Dern, and Isabella Rossellini, Blue Velvet is about a man who returns to his hometown after being away and discovers a severed human ear in a field. Not satisfied with the police's pace, he and the police detective's daughter carry out their own investigation. The object of his investigation turns out to be a beautiful and mysterious woman involved with a violent and perversely evil man. Now, before we get into our performances and story, let's go back to how this film started. The screenplay of Blue Velvet had been passed around multiple times in the late 1970s and early 1980s, with about several major studios declining it due to its strong sexual and violent content. Unfortunately, after the failure of David Lynch's 1984 film Dune, he made attempts at developing a more personal story, somewhat characteristic of the serialist style displayed in his first film, Eraserhead. You know, just my personal fave. So Blue Velvet actually initially received a divided critical response, which makes a lot of sense for the time and also makes sense now because I have told many friends to watch this film and there has been a pretty even split of them either loving it or saying it's really boring and they hate it or it made no sense. At the time, many people were stating that its explicit content served little artistic purpose. I'm going to have to politely, very politely disagree with that statement. Nevertheless, that did not stop this one from being an icon because the film earned Lynch his second nomination for Academy Award for Best Director, and it did receive the year's Best Film and Best Director prizes from the National Society of Film Critics. And of course, as you all know, and if you're here today and we're celebrating together, this film obviously reached cult status. Another thing that I read that I loved about this film is that, as an example of a director casting against the norm, this film was credited for revitalizing Hopper's career and for providing Isabella Rossellini with a dramatic outlet beyond her previous work as a fashion model. Oh, and she was also a cosmetic spokeswoman, which, the more you know, I never knew that before this. In the years since, the film has been reevaluated and is now widely regarded, of course, as Lynch's major works and one of the greatest films of the 1980s. To no surprise, because this film is a banger. So when I was deciding doing this retrospective series, my first thoughts were like, okay, I have covered Eraserhead. Now it is time to dive into Blue Velvet. I'm so excited. It's going to be my second time watching it. Maybe I'll pick up on things that I didn't pick up the first time, because naturally with David Lynch's work, that's going to be the case. So actually pretty funny, but when I first watched this film, I said, I bet David Lynch heard the song Blue Velvet and was just like, oh my God, I got it. And actually, when hearing his thought process, baddies, I was not far off. So David Lynch had mentioned in an interview that the film's story originated from 3 ideas that he had crystallized in his mind over a period of time starting as early as 1973. First, he had mentioned that it was kind of just a feeling and he just had the title. The second idea was of a severed human ear lying in a field, and he had mentioned something really interesting that kind of just makes the most sense for David Lynch. And he said, and I quote, "I don't know why it had to be an ear, except it needed to be an opening of a part of the body, a hole into something else. The ear sits on the head and goes right into the mind, so it felt perfect." Yeah, a very Lynch sentence, I would say. And finally, of course, his third idea was about Bobby Vinton's version of Red Velvet, which is actually my personal favorite version of the song. The song to me is so beautiful, and it feels both hopeful and somber at the same time. And no one other than Isabella Rossellini really could have nailed singing this song with that feeling each time. Speaking of Miss Rossellini, let's dive right into our performances. This film is very powerfully led by Kyle MacLachlan, who gives such a lovely, nuanced performance, as he often does for me. He gives this very boy next door kind of vibe that I'm just absolutely a sucker for. He has the look, he's got the aura, he is it. He is that guy. He complements our 2 leading ladies so incredibly well. We have Laura Dern and Isabella Rossellini, and he has wonderful chemistry with both of them. I really can't sing any more praises for Kyle MacLachlan. He is so lovely to watch. Laura Dern, or as David Lynch used to like to call her, Tidbit, she gives off this very sweet pastel girl next door vibe, and she does it so well, and her role is actually one of my favorites in the movie. Her and Kyle MacLachlan are so similar, yet so different, but like their vibes make so much sense. They really complement each other. While she is playing this innocent type of role that I feel like could have easily just been, you know, kind of brushed to the side and didn't really matter, her role actually matters a lot to the story and of course to our lead Jeffrey. And the way that her and Kyle bounce off of each other and work together in every single shot that they are in is so incredibly charming, especially every scene of them in the diner. Fun little trivia moment. Can you guys believe that Laura Dern was actually 18 and like fresh out of high school when she booked this film? Blue Velvet is actually considered to be like her breakthrough performance, and I completely get why. She is an absolute star in this movie. I know she was in Mask before this film, but I love that this is the one that had everybody like, oh, we love her. She is the it girl. That is a star. Moving on to Queen Isabella Rossellini in the film, who I had no idea, by the way, is the daughter of actress Ingrid Bergman. I didn't even know that. Why didn't I know that? So Isabella was quickly casted after David Lynch had met her at a restaurant, and he kind of just offered her the role and was like, you're the one. Now we have to talk about her performance too, because it's one that really sticks with me. She has some of the most memorable lines in the film. She has to do so much here. I mean, she is fully nude. A lot is going on. A lot happens to her character. And she just gives this very vulnerable, grounded performance. I love her. The movie feels so big and surreal, and she is just so in her element. I love every scene. I love especially all of her scene work with Kyle MacLachlan. So unfortunately, after the completion of Blue Velvet, Isabella's agency reps dropped her as a client. They were like, wow, this did so bad. How could you do this to your career, basically? And there was also a really funny story that Isabella told in a few interviews. She mentioned that the nuns in the school that she had attended in her youth back in Rome, they had called her to let her know that they were praying for her, which I just find absolutely hilarious. Imagine being that iconic that you just like affect all of the nuns and they're like, oh my God, eso no de Dios. Like, honestly, if that happened to me, I would have known I've made it. Luckily, Isabella seems to find the whole thing extremely funny today, and she speaks very highly about this movie, her experience, and her very sweet relationship with David Lynch at the time. Actually, while doing all of my research, I had learned that they were together for a few years and they were even engaged, and I did not know that prior. But when looking all of this up and looking at pictures of them, it was so sweet that your girl was just like typing the script up and crying. I was like, he was so loved, and everyone just has nothing but positive things to say about him. They had such a sweet, beautiful relationship, and they stayed best friends until he passed. And so that gets me every time. Okay, and I also have to talk about Dennis Hopper, who plays our almost cartoonishly weird villain in this film. Yeah, he is incredibly over the top, and I think it works. It makes so much sense. If there is any director, if there's any project that you are going to be in and do the most, it's in a David Lynch movie. When Dennis Hopper and David Lynch had spoke about the part, apparently Dennis Hopper was very, very eager to do this movie. He was like, I've got to play Frank. I am Frank. And to be honest, that about sums it up, because he really, in this movie, is the character. Like, he is 100% in a different universe. There are times where I'm like, this guy is doing too much. I really liked his performance a lot, and I think it makes a lot of sense. It really fits with what everybody else is doing, and ultimately it just works. It's this very surreal, very Lynchian performance. And since we are on that topic of the Lynchian surreal vibe, let's talk about how this film was shot. So Blue Velvet was actually shot at EUE/Screen Gem Studio in Wilmington, North Carolina, and they also provided all of the exterior scenes of Lumberton. Now, I wanted to bring this up specifically because there's like a little trivia moment in here that I found incredibly interesting that I was like, this is really necessary to discuss, I think. Actually, a lot of shooting for this movie became quite challenging for David Lynch and the rest of the cast. I won't say what the scene is, but the most disturbing scene in the film that involves Dorothy proved to particularly be challenging. So apparently a bunch of townspeople had arrived to watch the filming, and they were like outside with picnic baskets and rugs against the wishes of Rossellini and Lynch. However, they continued filming as normal, and when David Lynch called cut, the townspeople left. But as a result of all of that, the police told David Lynch basically that they were no longer permitted to shoot in any public areas of Wilmington. Now, outside of the challenging behind the scenes, the film looks incredibly beautiful and came out perfectly. And that's really where I want to live right now. I really need to focus on how this movie looks. Because girl, you've heard me talk about this. I just talked about this film in my favorite erotic thrillers video from a couple weeks ago. So you know I'm gonna talk about the colors and the lighting and everything. Get real. If there is anything that we know and love about David Lynch, it is that he is a man of style, and very distinct style at that. The film actually has a lot of film noir aspects to it, not only in how it's shot. We obviously have the femme fatale, we have the villain who will stop at nothing, and of course the questionable moral outlook of the hero, obviously Jeffrey. What I love so much about Blue Velvet is that it uses a lot of dark, almost shadowy cinematography. And that is really prominent in film noirs. So it just works so beautifully. They feel like one. The main thing I love about this movie, and I've spoken about it to death, is the use of color and how much the use of reds and blues are really prominent, kind of like in today's video. The lighting, to no surprise, is done in such a tactful way that helps immerse you in the world that really just feels dreamlike. You kind of want to stay there, even though it's this very uncomfortable, almost claustrophobic vibe. I, of course, am a sucker for the use of textured, really bright curtains. Obviously, I love Jolly, and there's always a lot of textures and cool, interesting things going on in the background of these scenes. I love the use of the red curtains in Dorothy's apartment, and it's even in the nightclub where she sings, and this actually became a David Lynch trademark, and we see him use it in many of his works later. We see it in Twin Peaks. We see it a lot. To get into the story, and I don't want to spoil it for those who haven't seen the film, because if you are looking to get into David Lynch and now is your time, you're like, oh my God, now I really need to do this. Like, I've been putting it off for so long and now is the time. Well, I am going to keep all my thoughts on the story pretty vague so you don't have to worry about spoilers. Story-wise, I think Blue Velvet is very, very polished. I really do think it's one of his best. The film feels strange and uncomfortable at times, yet you just can't look away. It's kind of like this weird nightmare that's kind of beautiful, that you're really terrified, but you want to stay. I don't know if that's just only me. I've only had that experience, but that's what this film kind of feels like for me. The story to me isn't too heady either. It's a fairly simple crime mystery thriller, but it has David Lynch's quirkiness, so that makes it unique and unlike any other crime mystery thriller I've ever seen. It's a movie that, even though the story is simple to a degree, it leaves you full of so much curiosity. You have so much questions and just overall this glooming yet hopeful feeling, much like how the song Blue Velvet makes me feel. And to me, that makes this film brilliant. It's a strange world, that mind of David Lynch, and I am so happy that we all get to swim in it. Even with him gone now, his legacy still lives on. I don't think there will ever be a crime mystery quite like this one for me. It is in a category of its own. And with that, I am going to be giving Blue Velvet 4.5 levs out of 5. To me, this is on the list of films that you absolutely have to see before you die. And actually, that is why I'm here today, to hopefully inspire you to take a walk to the moon with me. We can all meet there for a cherry pie and a damn fine cup of coffee. I really hope to see you there. All right, you guys, that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, as it really helps me a lot. And be sure to click that little notification bell to be up to date every single time I upload. And let me know in the comments if you enjoyed the first episode of this series. Let me know, what is your favorite David Lynch film? Anything about David Lynch, would love to talk about it in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.